Now, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama is reportedly preparing to unveil a new jobs package early next month. Citing a senior administration official, the Associated Press reports Obama will propose, quote, tax cuts, jobs-boosting infrastructure ideas, and steps that would specifically help the long-term unemployed. Obama has faced criticism for his focus on reducing the U.S. deficit amidst high unemployment. On Tuesday, Obama unveiled a new initiative for rural areas during a trip through Iowa.
Saying that we're ramping up our efforts to get capital to small businesses in rural areas. We're doubling the commitment we've already made through key small business lending programs. We're going to make it easier for people in rural areas looking for work to find out about companies that are hiring. We're going to do more to speed the development of next-generation biofuels. And we're going to promote renewable energy and conservation.
Obama was in Iowa as part of a three-day bus tour through the Midwest. On the Republican side, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney took aim at Obama during a campaign stop in New Hampshire.
2 days of a bus tour are not going to make up for 2.5 years of failure to get the American people back to work. I know that he looks at this as kind of a celebratory bus tour, but there's no question in anyone's mind. But he would not be doing that bus tour if his first 2.5 years have been successful. This for him is an effort to try and convince the American people he ought to be reelected. And his record speaks a heck of a lot louder than these bus tires do.
Two Democratic state senators in Wisconsin have retained their seats in the last of a series of recall elections. Democratic incumbents Bob Wirtz of Pleasant Prairie and Jim Halperin of Conover were among the 14 state senators who fled Wisconsin in February to delay passage of Governor Scott Walker's anti-union law. The Wisconsin recalls were seen as a referendum on the law, with both supporters and opponents facing the loss of their seats. Although Republicans retained control of the Senate, their majority after the recall has shrunk from 19 to 14, down a one-vote advantage of 17 to 16. After Tuesday's results were declared, Democratic incumbent Bob Wirtz spoke at a gathering with supporters.
All these wonderful people, grassroots, Paul Wellstone politics, and I love it, all these wonderful people, and you try and help them. I fight for the underdog. You keep it real simple. I think we sent a message to this governor, quite frankly. We didn't win control of the Senate, but we sent a strong message.
What's that message?
Moderation is good, compromise is good, and working class people are not second-class citizens.
Protests have been held in a number of U.S. cities over the Obama administration's expansion of the controversial immigration enforcement program known as Secure Communities. On Tuesday, several dozen activists delivered a petition to President Obama's campaign headquarters in Chicago. In other protests, some 200 activists walked out of a hearing in Los Angeles called by a task force advising the enforcement program. Demonstrations were also held at Democratic Party offices in Miami, Atlanta, Houston, Charlotte, North Carolina. Secure Communities requires local police to forward fingerprints of every person they arrest to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. In recent months, the governors of Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York have pulled out of the program. But earlier this month, federal officials announced the program is not voluntary and that local governments cannot withdraw. The Syrian government's claiming it's begun withdrawing from 2 besieged cities, but residents say military operations against opposition protesters remain underway. An estimated 36 people have died in the 5-day assault on Latakia. Thousands of Palestinian refugees have fled the city after their camp came under heavy shelling. Meanwhile, demonstrations have been reported in at least 3 other Syrian towns despite the ongoing threat of government attacks. At a public event in Washington, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the U.S. is pushing for additional sanctions on Syria.
It is a growing international chorus of condemnation. The United States has been instrumental in orchestrating that, and we are pushing for stronger sanctions that we hope will be joined by other countries that have far bigger stakes economically than we do.
Libyan rebels are claiming to have made a number of gains in advancing on Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi's stronghold in the capital, Tripoli. The rebels have reportedly seized most of the city of Zawiya from the west, while also controlling access to Tripoli from the south. In Brussels, a NATO spokesperson said the conflict in Libya is reaching a turning point.
We have witnessed significant advances of anti-Gaddafi forces on several fronts. In the northwest, where Gaddafi forces have lost considerable grounds, and also in the regions of Misurata and Brega. Anti-Gaddafi forces are now assuming control of the key approaches to Tripoli. These advances are the most significant anti-Gaddafi territorial gain we have seen in months.
The Libyan rebels' National Transitional Council, meanwhile, is denying reports of talks with Gaddafi regime officials in neighboring Tunis. Speaking in Washington, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said Gaddafi's days are numbered.
Gaddafi's forces are weakened, and this latest defection is another example of how weak they've gotten. So I think, you know, considering how difficult the situation has been, the fact is the combination of NATO forces there, the combination of what the opposition is doing, the sanctions, the international pressure, the work of the Arab League, all of that has been very helpful in moving this in the right direction. And I think the sense is that Gaddafi's days are numbered.
Aid workers continue to report high numbers of deaths in the famine gripping the Horn of Africa. At one camp in Ethiopia, a spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said 10 children are dying each day.
An assessment of mortality in one of 4 refugee camps at the Dolo Ado complex in Ethiopia has found that death rates have reached alarming levels. Since the Kobe refugee camp opened in June, an average of 10 children under the age of 5 have been dying each day. An outbreak of suspected measles, combined with high rates of acute malnutrition, is thought to be the major cause of death.
We'll have more on the famine in the Horn of Africa after headlines. New revelations have raised further questions about whether Rupert Murdoch, his son James, and other top officials at their media empire have lied about their knowledge of phone hacking at the News of the World. On Tuesday, British lawmakers released a letter from former News of the World correspondent Clive Goodman, claiming senior executives openly discussed the phone hacking until then-editor Andy Coulson directly ordered them to stop. Coulson, who went on to become the spokesperson for British Prime Minister David Cameron, has publicly denied having any knowledge of the hacking. British lawmaker Tom Watson detailed the letter's revelations.
And within the letter, he makes the allegation that phone hacking was openly discussed at editorial meetings of News of the World until explicitly stopped by Andy Coulson. And he also says that he was told he would be able to keep his job after the criminal trial was over if he didn't implicate others in wrongdoing in his mitigation of the court case. And he said that the editor and the lawyer for the paper gave him that assurance. So they're very damning allegations indeed.
Clive Goodman's letter also implicates Rupert Murdoch's longtime friend and aide Les Hinton, who stepped down as chair of Dow Jones and as publisher of the Wall Street Journal last month. Hinton was sent a copy of the letter 4 years ago, but never passed it on to police. He also helped steer the effort by top Murdoch officials to absolve Coulson of responsibility and paint Goodman as the only journalist involved in the phone hacking. Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch have denied knowing about the hacking. On Tuesday, a former News International executive added further detail to his previous assertion that he personally told James Murdoch about an email extensively detailing the hacking in 2008. The executive, Tom Crone, says the younger Murdoch approved a settlement to a British soccer executive based solely on the email Murdoch now says he was not aware of. John Whittingdale, the British lawmaker chairing the parliamentary inquiry into the hacking, says that James Murdoch will likely be called in for another round of testimony.
We will also be seeking further information from a number of other individuals, both the legal firms employed by News International and former and current employees of News International. And in due course, when we have all of the information that we've requested, we may well wish to put further questions to James Murdoch.
The World Bank has unveiled a report warning food costs are approaching levels that sparked massive unrest across the globe 3 years ago. Jose Cuesta, senior economist at World Bank's Poverty Reduction and Equity Group, unveiled new findings.
global prices of food remain very high, very close to 2008 peak levels, and basically 1/3 above of the prices that there were 1 year ago. They will find more difficult to access and to buy food. They will find more difficult to diversify their diets, and the cost of living for everyone, for all consumers, of course, especially the poor, will worsen. The cost of living will increase, and that will worsen their ability to buy their diversified foods.
The head of the IMF has warned that reliance on spending cuts will hurt global economic recovery. In an opinion piece published in the Financial Times Tuesday, Christine Lagarde, managing director of the International Monetary Fund, said spending cuts were not the appropriate means to forestall another recession, writing, quote, "We know that slamming on the brakes too quickly will hurt the recovery and worsen job prospects." A journalist for the news network Al Jazeera has appeared in Israeli court 1 week after his arrest while crossing the border between Jordan and the occupied West Bank. Israel's charged Samar Alawi with being a member of Hamas and has extended his detention by at least 7 more days. Alawi currently serves as Al Jazeera Arabic's bureau chief in Kabul, Afghanistan. Alawi's attorney says his client's been interrogated about his work and management of the Kabul bureau, his personal financial information, and his relationships with colleagues, friends, family, and relatives. Alawi reportedly told his lawyer he could be charged with transferring money and orders from Afghanistan to the West Bank if he refused to act as an informant. The Honduran government has dispatched 1,000 troops to the disputed Aguan River region after clashes between peasants and powerful landowners left 11 people dead earlier this week. The killings are the latest in the dispute between peasants demanding recognition of their land rights and palm oil plantation owners who've hired private security forces to carry out targeted attacks. At least 34 impoverished farm workers have died in the last 2 years, though human rights groups fear the actual toll is far higher. And 4 large tobacco companies have filed a lawsuit seeking to block the U.S. government from forcing them to display new warning labels on cigarette packs. The labels use images including dead bodies and diseased lungs to warn of the dangers of smoking. In the suit, the companies say including the labels would violate their free speech rights and force them to, quote, engage in anti-smoking advocacy on the government's behalf. The labels would mark the first change to U.S. cigarette warnings in 25 years. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Good.